And this is Sherry Andrea, and I am glad to be with you. And tonight we have a really special guest that I'm really excited about, Christopher Stewart, Christopher Stewart, who is a medical intuitive who weaves together science and spirit in the creation of healing and health. And now I'm going to put Christopher on the line, and I think that everyone will really enjoy the show. And I thank you for listening today. And if anyone has any questions for myself or for Christopher Stewart, please call in at 714-816-4750. And also, if you want to listen to the show that way, you can also listen to the show that way. If you have to leave your house and you want to keep listening, dial into that number and you can also listen to the show. And now, here is Christopher Stewart. Hi, Chris. Are you with us? Hi, Christopher. Are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi, thank you for your patience. And this is Christopher Stewart, and I'm very excited that he can be with us today. As I just announced, that you were a medical intuitive, and I am happy that you can be here. And let's get started with me asking you, can you explain to everyone exactly what a medical intuitive is?
Well, it's a term that's been around for a number of years now. First kind of coined by Norm Seeley and Carolyn Nace, both of whom I have studied with.
Okay.
And a medical intuitive is basically someone who has a special working relationship with the human body, its energies and systems, and there is an ability to help heal as well as diagnose the underlying causalities, which may be both physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual, for various illnesses and health concerns in each person's body. A medical intuitive kind of views the body, of course on a physical level, but also on an energy level and on a spiritual level.
Okay. Now, often I will say to people, when people start talking about certain problems they have, and usually when they ask about energy healing, I often tell them, well, often you'll go to a doctor and a doctor will diagnose you with a problem, but a lot of times people want to know what the underlying issue is, what caused that problem. And now, is that basically what you are speaking of?
That is definitely one of the things I'm speaking of. Like, for instance, a client may come to me with a whole laundry list of different symptoms. I always have pain in my lower back. I always feel cold. I have this. I have that. And they've been to a doctor or doctors, and they're sent home as they thought they're crazy or whatever. And
right.
the doctor says, I can't do anything for you because nothing shows up on lab tests or whatever.
Right.
So there is, one of the abilities that I have is looking at the underlying causalities. It is rarely a single causality, but there are ones that, there are usually a few of them that are all interacting with each other.
Okay, and you work often in conjunction with traditional Western medicine. How are you?
Basically, I work with anybody's system of medicine. It's my feeling that the energy that is healing in the universe is not limited to a single system of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I do work with a number of traditional Western medical doctors. Sometimes they will call me and say, I have somebody I just can't figure out. Could you help me?
Okay.
And some of them are actually my clients as well. I look forward to the world where you can have healers and medical intuitives be part of a regular staff in a hospital or other
Right.
medical facility.
Exactly. So, related to that then, how do you handle, like, for example, someone coming to you for help and maybe they have been to see several doctors, no one is finding anything wrong with them, however, they've got all these symptoms, but no one's able to diagnose them, and then you help them. Now, do people ever ask you, okay, well, how do I broach the subject of medical intuitive healing to my doctor? How do I find out if my doctor is going to be open to discussing this with me?
Well, one of the things that, healing is all about empowerment of the client. A lot of the work that I'm doing, the client can take the information and other things that they've been given, the tools that they've been given in a session, and do a lot of things themselves. So a number of my clients won't really share with their regular physicians. Others will. I have gotten in some interesting debates with physicians.
Okay.
And some of them are more open than others. Actually, a really great diagnostician in the Western medical tradition a lot of times is a really good medical intuitive. They just wouldn't tell you that. They may say, I know the lab test says green, but I just feel it's brown.
Okay.
And they just go with seeing it as brown, and they work with that, and that's what helps with the patient.
Does anyone ever ask you, how can I find a doctor that's maybe a little bit more intuitive? What are the signs you should be looking for?
Well,
yeah.
Sometimes they do. I don't have. I have a few, but they're scattered all over the country.
Right.
So it's rare that that somebody will call me and say, I live in Chicago. Do you know a good doctor for me in Chicago? I'm always interested in hearing about those people from my clients. I always say, if you have a doctor that's open to any of these things from any tradition, please tell me their name, because I would like to be able to refer people to them.
Right, exactly.
Because a lot of times, people can be just as dogmatic in the quote-unquote alternate medical field as the traditional Western medical field.
Exactly. Now, how do you do this? How do you do sessions?
I work primarily over the telephone with people.
Okay.
And we're all beings that are connected to one another. So there's no problem with working over the phone. The energy is the same.
Right.
I have clients in Asia, in Europe, the Middle East, South America that I work with. There's really no drop-off in the distance. Okay, so basically it is like having a conversation with someone. And I'll end up scanning the entire person in conjunction with what they are, we'll look first at the areas they're concerned with, but some other things may stick out at me during that scan. I work best from the specific back to the general. So if a person comes to me, let's say, with concerns about fertility, we're going to spend time with that. But if, let's say, I happen to see a cyst growth in their breast, I'm going to tell them that.
Right.
Not to make them frightened, but to just say, this is something you should take a look at.
Okay, and that is great. And now, is that common? Is that common that usually happens where you look at the specific problem they're asking you to look at, but then is it common that most people have maybe one other issue that they may not know about?
Right. Or they've kind of pushed it to the back. We all have things we can kind of ignore.
Right.
And sometimes it shows up, and it does. I'm interested in the overall health and optimal well-being of each one of my clients. So if there is something that sticks out there, I am going to mention it to the person.
Okay, and now I'm very interested to know, do you suggest just doing one session, or is a session actually, is this, or do you have the occasion where you need to follow up with a person?
My initial sessions I schedule to last about 90 minutes. Okay, because it's a lot of material, and I've been doing readings for 20 plus years, and I found that taking 90 minutes for an initial session is, gets the best benefit. If, for instance, a lot of people, if they go to a homeopath, for instance, they'll be there for 2.5 hours.
Right.
Or, certain types of Chinese medical practice, they'll be there for a couple hours. So the initial appointment lasts for about 90 minutes. Many people get so much benefit from an initial appointment.
Okay.
They don't need to do anything. They leave with a lot of things to do for themselves.
Right.
And I encourage people to stay in touch with me electronically via email afterwards and just, drop me a line, tell me how you're doing.
Right.
There are people who may, like for instance, a woman who would come to me with an infertility issue.
Mm-hmm.
Usually there is a process involved with following up on those for a couple more appointments to see where things are.
Okay, which is understandable.
My follow-up appointments last about an hour, so they're not certainly as lengthy because we've gone over a lot of the initial things already.
Yeah, it sounds like you are putting, a lot of time into each client, even if they only have one session. It sounds like you are really making sure that they end up with a resolution, and if maybe you stay in contact in a way where if they need further help, then you can recommend that they get another session. Is
right.
that what you're pretty much doing?
Right. Or for an instance, let's say a person has a very emotionally based problem. Let's say certain types of emotional trauma. Okay. I may work with somebody for 3 sessions after their initial one. I'm a healer, so I'm interested in the results part. This isn't like long-term psychotherapy where a person's going 2 or 3 times a week for 10 years.
Right.
I have nothing against long-term psychotherapy. It can be wonderful for people, but it's not the focus of my work.
Right. Exactly. I understand that. So I can imagine you deal with people with, speaking of emotional issues, from post-traumatic stress syndrome to people who are just maybe going through a rough emotional period just at that time because of maybe something that's going on with their life at that moment.
Yes.
And I also noticed you do a lot of work with people regarding relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your relationship, your relationship life, is so tied into your health and well-being. We've all heard about people that have died of broken hearts. Right. We also hear about people who are in a relationship that feeds them so well they feel they can do anything.
Right, exactly.
And that's what I want for everybody.
Oh, exactly, and that's why I was so excited to, have you on the show, because I think that what you're doing would be so useful to so many people that maybe have been in a place where they've either been in physical pain or emotional pain for such a long time to finally get resolution.
Exactly.
Now,
I have a background in both. I spent a period of time at the Jung Institute in Zurich, in Switzerland.
Oh, okay.
So I do have a background in analytical psychology, of Jung and his school of thought and practice.
And how long did you study there?
I was there for a couple of years.
Oh, that's excellent. That is excellent. And I mean, because many people, I think that when they're looking for someone for help, I mean, I hear it often where people say, well, I don't know whether to go to this person or whether I should, whether this person will be good to help me. And so I think these are questions. A lot of people don't know the questions to ask as far as a person's experience, what they've studied, so I think that that's really great. Now, how do you perform your medical intuitive healing work?
Well, basically, it's like I said, it's like having a conversation, and it's done over the phone. And when we're speaking, I'm looking at you through a different series of frequencies. Some people have an awareness when I'm scanning them. They will actually say, wow, I feel this heat in my belly. Or I feel this slight pressure against my left shoulder. Okay, not everyone is going to do that. It's interesting and I always say to people, that's me standing there looking at you.
Right.
You actually have an awareness of that. And there is, during the consultation, some distance healing that is actually going on. And healing comes in many forms. Sometimes it can be a form of insight and information about what is going on in your body. Other times it may be in the realm of very wordless, just energies for you.
Right, because I can imagine that sometimes it happens that after you give everyone the information, that often some of what you tell them is very healing to them. Just, as speaking of, truth being very powerful, to realize truth ends up healing.
Yeah, and it's a very interactive process. I encourage people to ask any and all of their questions as we go along. The entire session is recorded, so you get an MP3, which you can play on an iPod or any number of other, systems. And whatever recommendations I make, I document for each one of my clients. So it's a pretty relaxed process. I say that all you need to do is sit in a chair with your feet on the floor and be comfortable.
So now, how interactive is it for them, though? I mean, is it basically literally they're kind of just sitting there relaxing and you're doing all the work?
They come with a list of, I have a concern about this. I notice my memory isn't as sharp as it once was. That's a concern of mine. There's a history of Alzheimer's in my family, for instance.
Okay.
Or I have a concern about this, or I've noticed that I'm having a lot of pain, or I wake up a lot, each night at 2 o'clock in the morning. What's that all about?
Okay. Now, let me ask you, do you find yourself working with a lot of people who are on a spiritual path where the help that they want from you is actually tied into their spiritual advancement?
All the time.
Okay. And
I work with people from about every spiritual tradition, that's around. From ones you've never heard of to, very straight ahead Christian, Protestant type of approaches. Okay.
So let me ask you a question. If you were to get someone that said, I'm on a spiritual path, but I feel like I'm stuck, what you're basically doing, helping them to figure out the reasons why? Or
that could be one of the things. It's like why you're stuck, or why do you wish to remain stuck? Okay, we all know we can hang on to what we want to be stuck with incredible tenacity.
Right. Right, exactly.
I know I can.
I've been there. And
we all got T-shirts to prove it too.
I know. I could go pull mine out.
There you go. We'll have a fashion show.
Can you talk about? I want to give all the listeners a good idea of all the different types of issues that they may want to call you for help with. For those who may not be thinking you could help with this or that where you may be able to. Can you kind of give us a rundown of some examples?
Sure. Okay. First of all the big illness things: cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, various gynecological problems, infertility. I have a great track record and a wonderful collection of baby pictures of formerly infertile women.
Oh, that's so sweet.
My current record is a woman who had her first child at age 50.
Wow.
I don't think I'll get beyond 50, but that was pretty amazing, and the child is about as healthy as a human being can be.
Aww.
So that's a lot of fun, and I love kids, so the fertility work is very very joyful.
Oh, I can
also
imagine.
work a lot with ADD, ADHD, autism, various bipolar conditions, depression, anxiety, trauma, addiction, relationship issues, issues around balance of energies, of people who are tremendous overgivers and have a hard time receiving back for them, whether on an emotional or other level, because over time your body will start to break down from that because it's so imbalanced.
Oh, okay.
So you had mentioned the emotional realm and relationship realm that people have. I work with that a lot. There's no standard labels really for it, but sometimes I also do these things where I've done any number of readings for women about the men in their life. The boyfriend or the husband. Oftentimes, the boyfriend or the husband doesn't want to talk to me. They're dying for the information, but they don't want to deal with it. So they'll get the girlfriend or the wife to do it. I do that all the time. And it works just as well. If you have a bond with that person, that's what I'm connecting with. Just like if you had, let's say, a father or a mother that was very aged and had some difficulties, I would be able to work with that person as well without ever talking to them.
Okay, so are you talking about like people that call you and say, oh, I've got issues with my parents?
Sometimes that's true, or I just want to help my mom or dad.
Okay.
And my mom or dad thinks all this stuff is a lot of hokey, and but I do want to help them, and I'll figure out a way of getting the information to them.
Okay.
When people say to me, "I don't believe in your work," my answer is, "You don't have to believe in it. It only has to work."
Okay. So, and it's funny that you said that because there was a question that I wasn't going to ask, and now that you've said that, I'm going to ask it. Often, many healers are under the impression that a person who comes to them that does not believe in what they're doing, the type of healing that they're doing, may block the healing from happening. So what you're saying is they don't have to believe that it's possible.
No. In fact, Larry Dossey, who you may or may not be familiar with, he's written a number of books. He did some very interesting studies on the power of prayer in healing. And they would have these different groups, people who knew they were being prayed for, people who didn't know they were being prayed for, people who were totally against it, and things like that.
I do remember that study.
Oddly enough, the people who did the best were the people that did not know they were being prayed for. Not by a huge number, but enough to be statistically significant.
And is that possibly because those were the people that didn't have an expectation?
Expectations are usually, the difference is you can have an expectancy in healing, which means I'm not putting it into a certain framework.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like if you go out with your best friend for dinner, you have an expectancy of, I'm going to have a great dinner with my best friend. Do you have to have a specific menu? That's the expectation.
Right. Right. That is very interesting, and I'm glad you brought up that study because I do remember reading about that study. And, yeah, I found it very interesting. And that is something that I'm sure that many people want to know is, is there help for me even if I'm not so sure I believe what you're doing?
They don't have to believe. It only has to work. If you have a willingness to work with the process,
right,
things work for you. Now, if I don't want to learn how to ride a bicycle, I will never learn to ride a bicycle.
Right.
But if somebody's showing me and I say, well, okay, I'm open to maybe experiencing this, I might find out it's the greatest thing I've ever done.
Right, exactly. Now,
and, can people block a healing for themselves? Yes, they can. There are three things that have to be in alignment for healing. It has to be the right time, the right place, and the right person. And if any of those three isn't there, it doesn't work.
Now, if that potentially happened, have you ever had anyone come to you and saying, okay, well, I didn't get any results. I haven't gotten a resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And that may possibly be the case that they're blocking it, and maybe they want to try it again because they really do want help.
Sometimes I will spend time with them and say, okay, well, let's go through what exactly did you do here? Did you do things by half measures?
Okay.
Did you sort of do it every, sporadic effort usually gets sporadic results.
And that brings up the subject of what type of things might you or have you suggested that people do on their end to help themselves?
Everything from, for instance, people will ask me, I have, let's say they have a digestive condition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Let's say they have some digestive condition. And they're looking at 3 different treatment modalities. And they will ask me which one feels to you, given your abilities and sensing, to fit the best with me.
Okay.
Okay. And I just did that today for someone. I can't go into the details, but
right.
I just did that today with someone.
Okay.
But it may be with another client the other day, we talked about a surgery for them and how that would work for them. I'm not against any particular activity in healing,
right,
if it serves the person. But I recommended everything from, certain, complex medical procedures, like, do this test, take a look at that, talk to your doctor about this.
Okay.
To various alternative practices, certain kinds of focused energy practices, nutraceuticals, changes in diet, spiritual practices, any number of things.
Now, the one thing, though, I didn't hear you mention was anything related to addiction.
I actually mentioned that I did work with addiction earlier.
Oh, okay.
I worked a lot with addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, food addictions. Meaning weight, usually too much weight. Some people too little weight.
Okay.
Of the addictions, food addictions can be the most complex because you can't not eat.
Right.
You can not drink or take drugs, but you can't not eat.
Right, exactly.
And that can be a very complex type of thing. And but no, addiction is. I worked with all the different ones up and down that list of the addictive sort of things. A lot of times addicts have, once they get off something and move on, it's like watching the sunrise.
Wow.
And it improves every person connected to them. It's like dropping a pebble in a pond of water and watching all the ripples go across.
Wow, that's amazing.
I work with a lot of people in 12-step programs.
Now,
I'm very friendly to 12-step people.
Right. But I'm sure, do people ever come to you, not in any program, not seeking any other help, where you also go ahead and say you recommend those things to them? Like, for example, here's some things you can do that'll help offer you support.
Right. Like I had a long-term client that I worked with who is extremely addicted to benzodiazepines. Okay, they're anti-anxiety medications.
Okay.
Okay, they're very potent and they have a very high addiction component to them. Anti-anxiety medications, because they have to work so quickly, it's really easy to get hooked. If I'm really anxious and I take a pill and it goes away, you bet I want another one.
Okay, I see.
And, she came to me with that. It's like, I have to get off these. How can I do it? And it was quite an involved process. But she's fine.
Okay.
And she was able to, it took time to wean her off of a very potent drug without her system crashing.
Exactly. And that's what I was going to ask you is, do you talk to them about the amount of time that it may take so that they're understanding kind of what they're in for?
Yes. Yeah, I will usually give any client in an initial session sort of a timeline. Okay, if we do this, this, and this is how I see, this is the timeline I see for this process.
Okay. That is really great.
I'm not, my timelines are not perfect. I'm not God, but they're pretty good.
Right. And also, after a session, I am sure you have a pretty good indication. So I'm sure you're coming pretty close. Now,
I can always do better on my timelines. But
well, I'm sure. I'm sure we would all feel that way. But I'm sure that with a resolution, most of your clients, they're not really concerned that much with your timeline being off. I'm sure they're thankful you gave them their life back.
Yeah, they are. I love working with my clients. I learn something every day from them.
Yeah, and I can relate to that. I'm always telling people, don't forget, I get something out of, when I do coaching sessions, I get something out of it as well. I learn something from it every time as well.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, now can you tell us about some of the cases that you had that really touched your heart?
Well, okay. I'll tell you about a couple. I have a client who contacted me concerning his grandmother and who was in a care facility. She'd been diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's. She was withdrawn, didn't recognize any of her family, was in quite a state of anxiety, because when you have people telling you, hey, I'm your relative, and you don't recognize them, that's pretty scary.
Right.
Okay. So I did a consultation for him, and I really stressed that for his grandmother to heal, he would need to be with her for some time each day to make sure she was doing certain things. Certain nutraceuticals were given to her and everything. A lot of care facilities won't do this. And I understand the legal reasons for them not doing it.
But you can go in and do it?
Yeah, if you're a relative, they'll let you do almost anything short of, really dramatic things.
Okay.
If you went in there and told them to give them a dangerous drug, they might have problems with that.
Right.
So he said, I will absolutely do that. And he did, so we finished the consultation. He took everything that I had given him. Mm-hmm. Okay. He visited her every day. Within 2 weeks, the grandmother started to come out of her withdrawal.
Mm.
She began to recognize her grandson and other people. Within 6 weeks, she checked out of the care facility.
Wow.
Okay, she moved to a condo in Florida.
Wow.
One of those classic senior citizen condos in Florida.
Yes.
Near her grandson. This is the part of the story that I just adore. She became the shuffleboard champion of the condo and had a really hot romance with an older gentleman there. And she died very quietly in her sleep at age 92, about 3 years later.
Wow.
We should all be that
amazing.
lucky, to die quietly in our sleep with a smile on our face.
Right, exactly. And without you, she was just looking at daily confusion.
She was.
That is so amazing.
Yeah.
Now, when you found out that she moved to Florida and became shuffleboard champion, were you surprised?
Well, I was surprised that she was. I didn't see that she would be a shuffleboard champion. No, I didn't. In fact, the grandson sent me a photograph of her with a shuffleboard. What do they call that? The stick in her hand.
Yes.
And with her arm around the trophy.
Oh wow! Wow.
So it's great. And so, of course, I continue to have her grandson as a client.
Wow, that is excellent.
Because all I have to do is tell that story to somebody, and it's just like, it's amazing. And it wasn't particularly expensive what he did.
Right.
And, you could argue maybe it was the love and the care that he showed and just poured into this person. You bet that had something to do with it.
Exactly.
Because it's all about love.
Right. And love is one of the most healing, powerful things that you can give.
It is the most powerful thing in my view. But I also once had I've had a number of couples who, one in particular that I'm thinking of, who arranged a consultation to see about conceiving a child.
Mm.
They had tried for 10 years, including a few rounds of pretty expensive IVF treatments.
Oh, wow.
In vitro fertilization runs about $10,000 to $12,000 a cycle, and on a really good day, it's 60% effective, and that's a pretty phenomenal day.
Right.
During their first session, I could sense this child being with them so clearly. I could hear, it was a boy, his voice speaking to me.
Right.
I communicated this to the couple. Did they believe it? No. They thought that I was just being nice to them. In fact, the husband says, "You have to say that to me." And I said, "No, I don't have to say that to you. This is what's being said to me." However, even with that, they did go forward. It turned in, I did a number of sessions with both partners. With fertility things, I like to work with both partners. I can work with just one, but I prefer to work with both.
Okay, now do you work with them together?
Sometimes together, sometimes separately, and when I say both parents, that can be 2 women, 2 men, or a man and a woman.
Okay.
The gender, the sexual orientation doesn't matter.
Right.
And so I worked a number of sessions with both partners. I used certain Tibetan medical plant compounds on certain days and times, as well as energy treatments for both partners. Okay. After 6 months or so, it was like a river became unfrozen in the mother. In fact, there was one evening where she went to the hospital because she was in a lot of pain.
Right.
And she couldn't, pelvic pain, and she couldn't figure it out, and neither could the hospital. So they just took a look at her, gave her a couple pain pills, and kind of sent her back home. Right. I remember telling her, this is like a log jam breaking. It's spring.
Right.
And shortly thereafter, I got a very excited phone call saying, "We're pregnant."
Oh, wow.
You could have knocked them over with a feather when they heard their child's heartbeat and saw the ultrasound.
Oh, wow.
He's carried full term, totally healthy, and now he has a little brother as well.
Oh, so now, and that resolved the problem. That means for the second child, since they were both healed, that left the door open also for the second child.
Oh, yeah. A lot of times with quote-unquote infertile people, the first one is the hard one. It's locking the door for all the other ones afterwards that you got a problem with. It's like if you don't want to get pregnant pretty fast afterwards, make sure you take precautions.
Yeah, exactly. And I know exactly what you're talking about because my sister had a hard time getting pregnant with her first child. But then after that, in a very short amount of time, came the second.
Oh, yeah. It's like, the pushing and shoving in the other realm saying, "It's my turn. No, it's my turn. No, it's my turn."
Right, exactly. And it's kind of like the door is open now.
Yeah.
And when you were speaking of the pain she was having, anyone who is familiar with energy healing work normally understands that during a healing they're clearing something.
Right.
And sometimes that could lead to pain. It can lead to their emotions and being emotionally all over the place. Now, do you kind of prepare them for what they may experience?
Yeah, I do. In this case, did I know it was going to happen on that Saturday night? No, I didn't.
Right.
It would have been nice. I might have said, "I think you might want to, be real good with yourself this weekend." But, and maybe that was what was needed, that it was something very dramatic that really moved things along.
Right.
If you've ever heard a log jam breaking up in the spring, it's like dynamite going off. It's very loud.
Exactly. But I'm sure at the time she went to the hospital with the pain, she still probably wasn't thinking,
she wasn't
this is my healing.
This is my healing, but when she got pregnant shortly thereafterwards, that was amazing.
Right, exactly.
And when she heard the heartbeat, that was then it was,
Now, and you were speaking of getting pictures of the children, and I can imagine you probably got pictures of both children.
Oh, yeah.
Now, do people normally keep in touch with you, even maybe for a while after? I mean, do you get, those second grade pictures?
Oh, it depends. I oftentimes don't get maybe their whole grade school type portfolios, but I will hear from them.
Right.
A lot of times they will, particularly if the child has an illness or something, or they'll say, why is my little boy or little girl having this kind of problem? They're usually so happy about things.
Right.
What's going on?
Right.
Because oftentimes I've kind of been in touch with them before they were in this world.
Right.
So there's a link with that child or children.
And speaking of that, can you talk a little bit about your abilities? I mean, how long have you had abilities or this ability? I mean, was this an ability that was with you your whole life?
The earliest I can remember it is I was about 4 years old. And I remember a relative who was visiting our house, and I pointed to his shirt and said, "Did your pen leak?" Or there's an ink spot or something like that on his shirt. And he kept looking at his shirt, and he said, "There's nothing there, there's nothing there, there's nothing there." And I kept seeing this ink splotch, because that was back in the day when people had fountain pens and they leaked.
Right.
And long before the days of electronic mail and stuff.
Right.
But so he just thought I was just being a funny little boy. There was an ink spot there, all right. It was a tumor on his lung that ultimately killed him.
Okay.
So that was kind of a negative proof to start out the gate.
Right. But now you were only, how old, 4?
I was 4. I didn't have a clue of what I was seeing.
Right.
I could just see it and sense it. And in school, as a young child, I could see and sense a lot of feelings and other states in the kids in the classroom. If someone had a toothache, I could usually feel it.
Now, are you an empath?
In a manner of speaking, yeah. I know the difference between what somebody's energy is and what mine is.
Mm-hmm.
So I can let it go. Where sometimes people who have the ability and haven't worked with it, they pick up everybody's feelings, but they don't know where they end and the other person begins.
Exactly.
So as a teenager, I kind of figured that I had to start learning something about this kind of stuff, or else I was going to go crazy.
Now, about when was that? What year are we talking?
Well, we're talking, I was about 13 when I started, reading up on things, and I started going to funny little churches, if I could, to hear people talk about healing.
Okay.
I went to hear Olga Worrell, who is long since passed on, she was a very Christian-oriented healer, but she was an extremely talented one. And other people of that ilk, and then later on in my life, I began to formally study with a number of different teachers and different traditions.
Okay. But at 13, did you find readily a lot of information that could help you, or is that why you went to various churches to hear different people?
I drove our local librarians crazy because I was trying to order up every book that I could possibly find on psychic phenomenon, healing, whatever.
Okay.
In the local library. So I became on a first-name basis at my local library, and which is fine. They were happy to help me.
Right.
But then I wanted to go further afield and be exposed to this sort of thing.
Now, I'm sure your parents kind of saw your interest. Now, what did they think, or are your parents also intuitive?
Well, they are. My grandfather was actually a dowser. So he was a dowser, and he ran a nursery. So he had a pretty good connection, shall we say, to the nature realms.
Okay.
But he also came from Maine, so he didn't tend to be real talkative. But he had a great presence about him. And I remember as a little boy, him showing me how to use a dowsing stick and those sort of things, and thinking, this is pretty neat. I can feel this. And we would go in fields and we would find things. The first time I found a nickel in the field, I thought I had, died and gone to heaven. Because a nickel, wow, a nickel,
Right, exactly.
It was like magic.
Right.
And, somebody said, do you think your grandfather put it there? I said, no, I don't. I think he was there to show me things.
Right, exactly.
So there was a certain amount of acceptance and a certain amount of head scratching at the same time.
Wow. And so what abilities are you using? I noticed that, and I want to go ahead and let everyone know this as well. The name of your website is clairvoyantguide.com.
Yes,
and so that implies that you're very clairvoyant, but you're also highly sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
What other abilities do you have going on?
I'm also very clairaudient.
Okay.
That's why phone sessions are, in many ways is playing into a strong strength, because a person's voice tells me all kinds of things about them.
Okay. And so during your sessions, you're pretty much using everything. Is there anything that comes up with your abilities that has surprised you?
Yeah. I had a client who I was looking at, and the person had a rather troubled sort of history with his parents. And it actually turned out that the person who he thought was his mother wasn't his mother.
Mm.
And this can be a rather touchy subject in a middle-aged man.
Right.
And, how do you communicate that in a way that somebody can hear it?
Right.
And this was, he was totally, it was totally unknown to him. But it was like a process of kind of gently opening the door so he could see that a lot of these places where he thought he didn't fit in was because it wasn't his mother. It wasn't his actual family. Just like a person who is adopted fairly often is actually in a family they should be with.
Right. Yeah,
but that was a very surprising sort of outcome. I would not have thought that right off the bat.
Right.
And it was a very delicate process because it involved some pretty dramatic things that happened during World War II.
Wow.
So.
That's really interesting, though. That is very interesting. I'm adopted, so I understand that. Even before I knew.
Exactly.
Because I could, going to family reunions and things, you can actually feel like whether or not you feel like you belong.
It's like people who are Native Americans, they can look at a person across the room who's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, they look like a California surfer girl, and say, she's part Native American.
Mm.
They just know it. It's uncanny sometimes. An adopted thing, you just know it. A person who's a twin, and let's say the other twin died in utero, will feel like there's always this other. Where is this other? Where is this other?
Oh, wow.
The bonding between people via energy is so potent. And once you're connected in whatever way, you stay connected.
Well, this has been an amazingly great experience interviewing you today, and I'm so happy that you allowed me to, because you are just wonderful. And now, before we go, I want to make sure everyone knows how to find you. First of all, I want to mention that Christopher has a newsletter, and if you go to his website, clairvoyantguide.com, and that's CLAIRVOYANT guide, which is GUIDE.com, you can sign up to receive his newsletter, and in that, you'll actually find out about workshops, classes, many other things he discusses. And definitely go to his website. He's got a lot of information, and you can actually get all the information to schedule a consultation. And then, Chris, what do you prefer? Would you just like them to go to your website, or is
the
there...
website answers a lot of questions. If people would like to talk to me for a few minutes and just get a feel for how I work a little more or something like that, I would invite people to give my office a call, and the phone number is 510-868-6041.
Very good.
If I'm not with a client, I'll be happy to talk to them right then. If I am with a client or doing other things, if they leave their name and number, I'll be happy to call them back. And I can very easily call people in Europe or Asia and things like that.
Okay, and do you want them, when they call you, to leave some little details about what they may be calling about, or does that matter?
If they feel like it, but if they just want to say that, hi, my name is Susie Miller, and I'd like to talk to you about your work, here's my phone number, that'll work too.
Okay, and just to let everybody know, I am going to write a blog post tomorrow to put all of Christopher's information, and a link to this show. So for those who didn't listen live, they can listen to it tomorrow when they have time. And Chris, it has been wonderful, and I thank you very much.
And thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope the information's been really helpful to the listeners.
Yes, it has. And maybe in the future, if there's something new that you've got going on, feel free to email me, because I would love for you to come back on the show. And
that'd be great. I'd enjoy that.
Yes. Thank you so much, Christopher.
You're very welcome. You take care, and everybody else that's listening, be well. Take care of you.
Thank you.
All right.
Welcome to the Sherry Andrea Show. Your host, Sherry Andrea, brings her listeners interesting discussions and topics related to spiritual development.